It was a great night for Michael Lorenzen at Kauffman Stadium, so let's dive into his start next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can catch us on wherever you get your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast. We're on Odyssey and we're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you're a first-time listener and you want to know a little bit more about me and this show, well, I'm based here in Kansas City. I work at Sports Radio 810 WHB, doing some hosting, some co-hosting, and some producing. But when it comes to this podcast, when you click on this link, you know that you're going to be getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. Today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use code all lowercase LockedOnMLB for a first deposit match of up to $100. Again, that's lowercase LockedOnMLB for a first deposit match of up to $100. Well, I was out at Kauffman Stadium tonight, had the chance to see the return of Johnny Cueto, who we're going to talk about coming up in about 10 to 15 minutes or so. But the star of the show, the MVP of the night, was Michael Lorenzen and his fourth start with Kansas City. Didn't look that sharp through the first three innings, battled around a lot of base runners, battled a little bit with his command, was hit hard a little bit. But after the third inning, he was nails. He didn't have any more issues for the rest of that outing. And the Royals offense didn't give him a giant cushion. It's not like he was able to pitch with a 10-run lead like Michael Wacha did last Saturday against the Reds. He had to be pretty sharp for the majority of his outing. It really wasn't until MJ Melendez gave him a solo home run off the foul pole, which got people at the game free chicken, or at least tomorrow. I think the deal is you can get free chicken if you stole them the ticket. I don't really know how that works just yet, but I know that it involves free chicken. So good for MJ Melendez and good for people that were going out there tonight to watch the Royals and their 3-0 win. But I think you look at the addition of Michael Lorenzen in such a strong light right now, because as we brought up with Paul DeJong a few episodes ago, when you have a rental, it doesn't necessarily mean they have to be phenomenal for every single game, every single start. I think what, Michael Lorenzen, Lucas Erceg, and Paul DeJong have given the Royals has been better than the front office could have even hoped for. I mean, they've been that good in a lot of different areas for the Royals. But Michael Lorenzen, I think, is the key piece to all of this, because Lucas Erceg, is the closer of this team. He's the fireman. He's been maybe the best reliever over the last, couple of weeks, just based off of his power, his strikeout numbers, his FIP, his, chase percentage, his whiff percentage, his walk rate, which he hasn't walked anybody yet in a Royals uniform, the amount of hits he gives up. I mean, yeah, you can make a strong case right there. Paul DeJong doesn't play every single day, but when he is out there, he gives the Royals an extra power bat in the middle of their lineup. With Michael Lorenzen, the reason I say he's the quote-unquote key piece to all of this is because he was able to give the Royals a slight upgrade in an area that maybe they weren't desperate for an upgrade for. Like, everybody knew they needed a power arm in the back end of the bullpen, and they have that in Lucas Erceg. Everybody knew they needed one more extra bat off the bench. Paul DeJong gave them that. But Michael Lorenzen, I think, was that addition at the time of, okay, hopefully that works out, but it's not really an area of need. The Royals' starting rotation had been its strongest attribute for the first 100 games of the season. And Lorenzen, being as good as he has been through these four starts, just gives them more length. And I think gives you an extra sense of confidence when he takes the ball. Right? Alec Marsh was really starting to struggle before he had been demoted down to Omaha, and you hope he comes back stronger than he was at the beginning of the year. But Michael Lorenzen working out so far has given the Royals the ability to take their time with Alec Marsh. And then if Marsh comes back up and he is valuable in a more of a unique role, it's all the better for Seth Lugo and Cole Reagans and Michael Wacha, guys that are coming up on a big inning workload, and they need just maybe an extra day or two to get that rest. And if the reason that this has been so valuable to the rotation is if Michael Lorenzen wasn't working out, let's say he had the Trevor Cahill effect that the Royals had back in 2017 when they got a number 4, number 5 starter, and Trevor Cahill was awful every time he took the bump. It eventually caught up to that team, and they just withered away before the postseason. That's why they didn't make it. Rotation wasn't good enough. Bullpen got taxed, and the offense just hit a rut late in the season. But with Michael Lorenzen giving the Royals, in my opinion, 3 really good starts or good enough starts over the 4, it's given that sense of confidence of, okay, now that we feel good about him, and if we bring Alec Marsh back up and he's better than he was before we demoted him, now you have that 6-man rotation potentially. Or if you use Alec Marsh out of, a long relief role in the bullpen, that's fine too. But it allows you to feel more comfortable about giving that extra day to Seth Lugo or to Cole Reagans. Because if things were ugly, if Michael Lorenzen had been shelled in these 4 outings, well, now you're going, okay, we gave up Walter Pennington, who was a bullpen arm, and we already demoted Alec Marsh. Did that do anything to his confidence? So we don't really have a true number 5 starter. Okay, I guess we'll try things again with Alec Marsh. It just gets a little bit more complicated right there. But the fact that he was an immediate upgrade, he's pitched well, and he's just giving them that extra inch, that extra mile for this team to get to the postseason, it's extraordinary. I think with those rental deals, at times as I opened up the show with, you're just expecting them to be phenomenal, right? You come in here, you're not going to be on the team for long, so you better be the best version of yourself. I don't really view it that way. If Michael Lorenzen makes 4 or 5 more starts and 2 of them are pretty good or about, as good as he was tonight, Michael Lorenzen was worth the deal. Because those 5 starts he gave you that were above average might have gotten you 5 more wins or 4 more wins because of the way that Alec Marsh was pitching. And with Alec Marsh, it was getting to a point where they couldn't trust him to take the ball every 5th day. You had to go and almost reinvent yourself a little bit down in AAA. And Michael Lorenzen stepping in and being really good in 3 of these 4 starts, it's been great for the Royals just to add an extra win here and there. Because I've gone back to this quote that Vinny Pasquantino had, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, just about stacking wins. We're not focused on this team or that team or a wild card lead or a central, deficit. It's just about stacking wins. And Michael Lorenzen has allowed them to stack a couple of wins because of some good outings. That's why, to me, he is that key piece in what they brought in at the trade deadline. Like Lucas Erceg is the headliner. He has been what everybody's talking about. Paul DeJong has had his moments. I wouldn't say Paul DeJong has won them a game. Actually, I could make a case for that series finale in Minnesota when he almost hit for the cycle. I'll give that to Paul DeJong. I think he was the reason they won that game. So there's another one you tack on. Lucas Erceg's won them a couple of games. So you have different guys that contribute in different ways. But for a starter, being a 5th starter like Michael Lorenzen is, he's able to give the Royals that extra boost. His ERA is under 2 since joining Kansas City, even though it's 4 starts and even though he's only going to make 4 or 5 more, assuming he stays healthy. If you're good in 5 of those 9 starts or 6 of those 9 starts, that's incredibly valuable, for what they gave up, what they needed from Lorenzen at that time. I mean, tonight is probably as good as Michael Lorenzen can get, and that's 7 shutout innings. Yes, against a bad lineup, but I thought he was really good against Cincinnati last time out before tonight in a hitter's ballpark. That's why I just think he's bringing that extra value to the rotation, because the Royals are going to have to navigate that rotation in September. Is Seth Lugo going to be running out of gas? Is Cole Reagans running out of gas? Is Michael Wacha going to be running out of gas? What's Brady Singer going to look like late in September? Just having an extra guy you can rely on that has worked out, that you made a move for, it gives you such a sense of relief. And I talked to Michael Lorenzen tonight in the locker room, or in the clubhouse, excuse me, about, playing for this defense. And he says that, defense is incredibly undervalued in baseball. And, to come over here, he's just loving pitching to a defense like that. And who wouldn't? The Royals have one of the best defenses in all of baseball. They've got the best defensive shortstop. They've got an elite defensive third baseman. They have elite defensive center fielder, some premium value positions, and they excel at those positions defensively. And when you got a guy like Michael Wacha who can pitch to a bit of contact, you're going to have outings like tonight. So that was great to see. Michael Lorenzen right now is looking like one hell of a pickup by the Royals front office. And considering they gave up, a longtime minor leaguer in Walter Pennington, who definitely deserved a shot in Kansas City, but they got Michael Lorenzen in return. And I don't think anybody's really thinking about Walter Pennington anymore, especially after tonight with how good Lorenzen was in 7 shutout innings against the Los Angeles Angels. We're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, such a cool night, such a cool scene for Johnny Cueto, who made not his first return since 2015, but I think a more memorable return for him in facing this playoff fighting Royals team. I guess we can call it fighting for a playoff spot is what we'll say with this Royals team. But I think far more of a memorable night for him. And I'm going to tell you what it was like to be there in person coming up on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our first sponsor in eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. And eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Well, as I mentioned to kick off the show, I was there tonight at Kauffman Stadium, back-to-back nights for me at the K, and tonight was far more memorable than what Tuesday night had. Tuesday night was ugly. The pitching wasn't that great. It was a rough outing for Cole Reagans. The offense really didn't get going till late, and they lose 9-5. It happens. It's baseball. We dove into that. I believe, actually, we did our episode before yesterday's game, so we didn't really dive into it. And I had teased that we were going to dive into it, but after work went a little bit long today, I thought that I would just have time to recap whatever happened tonight and put this series in kind of a nutshell, if you will. But tonight was far more memorable just because of the way Michael Lorenzen looked, the way Lucas Ursa looked out of the bullpen, MJ Melendez homered, and what Johnny Cueto did on the bump, and how Royals fans treated him in another return to Kauffman Stadium. So if you weren't familiar, Johnny Cueto had returned to Kauffman Stadium post 2015. In fact, it was 2022. He was a member of the White Sox, had a really good year, I might add, and he got knocked around by a bad Royals team. So I'm sure that night to him wasn't as memorable. He wasn't that great, and it was a bad Royals team. Quite the opposite tonight, even though it was just over 13,000 at Kauffman Stadium. He goes out there making his season debut at the big league level. There was probably a point in time early this year where he didn't know if he'd get back to the big leagues, and the Angels gave him a shot. I'm glad they gave him a shot. I'm glad that they gave him an opportunity against his former team, a team that he won a World Series with. And, I think if you were a Royals fan, but also a Johnny Cueto fan, tonight went about as perfect as it could have gone. The Royals won. That makes you happy. And Johnny Cueto pitched well. Makes you happy as well. And I'm one of those guys that was in that boat. I don't want to say that I wanted to put it up to chance of I didn't go in saying, well, I hope Johnny Cueto shoves, but the Royals win 1-0. I don't think I wanted to leave it up to that type of gamble late in the game. Even though Lucas Erceg would have been available, I don't think I would have, trusted this team that late in the 6th or the 7th inning if they were only up 1-0. I thought 3-0 was just perfect. And that's why I would say, tonight was as good as it could have been with Johnny Cueto making that return. He might get a couple more starts with the Angels. Who knows what they're going to do with his spot in the rotation. But I think he earned it tonight. He was very efficient. It reminded me at times of 2015 with how quickly he could work, just pitching to contact, using a defense. And the K gave him a standing ovation when he was pulled off the mound, and he was smiling, and he tipped his hat. And the cool part about it is that, and it's not just Kansas City, it's everywhere, that if you win a World Series with somebody, really doesn't matter, what your impact was. It's a matter that you were one of the 25 or 26 or 27 players. I think the Royals would have, given somebody like Chris Medlin, if he had a start or had an opportunity like Johnny Cueto did tonight and he walked off the mound, I think Royals fans would show him some love. Maybe the standing ovation wouldn't have been as loud because Johnny Cueto was an instrumental part. So maybe that goes against what I'm saying. But I think that's the beauty of baseball, is that fans, they'll cherish you forever. And Johnny Cueto was here for such a short time, and really, numbers-wise, wasn't that great in the regular season. Got knocked around a few times in the postseason, but when it mattered, an elimination Game 5 against the Astros, he delivered. In Game 2 of the World Series, he delivered. And it almost made me shudder a little bit when I tweeted out a picture at the game tonight to kick off the game, if you will. And it's been over 3,200 days since his last start in a Royals uniform. It was at Kauffman Stadium. He pitched a complete game against the Mets in Game 2. Just to kind of shows you how time flies. And I thought what I was able to cherish tonight, because I was a big Johnny Cueto fan, even before he was in Kansas City. I don't think after 2020, I thought that I would see Johnny Cueto pitch in person again. I wasn't there at that 2022 game, and I was kind of upset that I didn't get that opportunity, because I always wanted to make sure to go to those games where a 2015 or a 2014 player had returned, because you just got to watch the Royals, but also appreciate somebody that was so impactful to the organization. Johnny Cueto was one of those guys. And I didn't know if right off the bat, the Royals were going to play a montage, or if he was going to get a standing ovation when the starting lineups were announced. It wasn't really an ovation. There were a couple of loud cheers or some claps here and there, but there wasn't a big enough crowd for it really to be that noticeable. But when he left the mound, I think that was a really cool moment for him, for Royals fans, the fact they were winning. I mean, it went perfect for me. The Royals won the game. It really was never close, but Johnny Cueto pitched well enough, because I think a part of me would have died a little bit if Johnny Cueto gave up 9 in 2 innings. Just got absolutely beaten around, because that might have been his last outing of his big league career if it went that way. I do believe tonight was the last time I will be able to see Johnny Cueto pitch in person. I hope I'm wrong. I hope there is a world in which Johnny Cueto makes his way back around to a playoff team. I don't see that happening next year, because I don't know if he would make a team out of camp. But really, this late in the season, to get this opportunity, I don't think it helps the Angels organization, because he's a 38-year-old and he's likely not going to be there next year. But for a baseball fan, it was pretty awesome to see a guy who hadn't pitched in the bigs this year. He's nearing his age 40 season. He's 38 now, and he still can pitch a quality start out there against a good team, a team that's fighting for a playoff spot, or has one now, but fighting to keep it. And if this was a Johnny Cueto start for a playoff-bound team or a division-leading team, I think it would have made things better. The fact the Angels are completely out of it takes a little bit of the juice behind this start, but still, I think it was great to see. And to see him get that ovation, that's what makes baseball great. And at times, it makes you a little bit sad how many players from that 2015 squad are now out of baseball. And we know that, Salvi is going to be the last one remaining of that 2015 squad. And I can't believe that Johnny Cueto was kind of one of those guys to make a comeback and get back into a big league game. But good for him. I hope he stays in that rotation to close out the season. I hope he pitches well enough that somebody takes notice and gives him a 1-year deal for next year. but he's got to pitch just as well as he did tonight. And I thought he was efficient. He still was doing the shimmy shake and all of that, and had some good movement on some pitches. He was sitting in the low 90s, mainly just 90 miles an hour. Sometimes low 90s can be defined as 93. Wasn't quite getting to there. It was about 89, 90, and 91, but still had some good pitches. Struck out a few and got a big double play ball early on that could have led to a bad inning. And only one inning slipped away from him. It was the third inning, I believe it was. Might have been the second inning, actually, now I think about it. Kyle Isbell had the 2-run double, but then he was able to dance out of it. And through 6 1/3 tonight, could have gone a little bit more, but Ron Washington pulled him. And, that's a quality start for a 38-year-old making his season debut at the big league level. Had pitched in the minor leagues, had pitched somewhat well for the AAA team in the Angels organization. But he got to make his season debut at Kauffman Stadium, a place that he won over the hearts of Royals fans. And he'll forever be remembered as one of those instrumental parts of the World Series championship team. I don't know. I don't know if he could have one of those contracts of retiring a Royal, though he's probably better retiring as a Red because that's what a lot of people remember him as. But I know Royals fans embrace him just as much because when you win a World Series and you're one of those guys, you are forever going to be immortalized in that organization. Okay, we're going to take our final break of the show. Before we do that, thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On MLB podcast, where host Pat Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully, is there daily to provide national expertise with his trademark humor to help you get ready for the MLB playoffs here in the dog days of summer. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day on Locked On MLB, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. When we come back, the Royals have their final gauntlet of the year. It is going to define whether they are a playoff team or they'll be watching other teams in the playoffs come October. Let's dive into that next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I am your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our title sponsor in PrizePicks. It's America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It's also the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. And unlike other apps, on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the PrizePicks community today. You can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 and sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. Download the PrizePick app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePicks for a deposit match of up to $100. PrizePicks, run your game. Well, we're going to close out this episode with quite a bang because this is a segment that is supposed to make you feel fired up, make you want to run through a wall, because this 20-game stretch the Royals are about to embark on is going to tell us if they're a playoff team or not. I can be as blunt as possible here. This 20-game stretch will either have the Royals on the other side, battered and bloody, limping toward the very end of the season, or barreling through it with their chest puffed out and really kind of giving the double birds to all the other people and teams that doubted them. This is that stretch. Remember the gauntlet that we talked about at the end of, I think it was May, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was the end of May where the Royals had, still in my opinion, the toughest stretch that they were going to have all season long. So that came on, yes, it was the very end of May. It began on the 27th, which I think was Memorial Day, if I'm not mistaken. So they had Minnesota for 4, San Diego for 3, Cleveland for 2 because of the rain out, which will be made up on Monday as a part of a doubleheader at Progressive Field. They had the Mariners for 3, the Yankees for 4, and the Dodgers for 3. That was also a gauntlet that the Royals very much limped out of, and they did lose some ground and lost their cushion in the wild card race. It really buried them in the Central race at the time, but they were able to respond. Now, they didn't respond immediately. They had only taken 1 of 3 from Oakland. They got swept by the Rangers. They kind of reached that boiling point in the series finale against Miami because they had blown a game in game 2 of that series against the Marlins. And that game on June 26th, when they had that 5-run rally with 2 outs and nobody on in the 8th, that's what gave them the confidence again, because they took 3 of 4 from Cleveland. They did only take 1 from Tampa Bay, but that was a competitive series. Colorado, they kind of limped out of 2, so it wasn't instantaneous, but I did think that one game in Miami, that series finale, propelled them a little bit, because then they had that doubleheader sweep against the Cardinals. Then right out of the All-Star break, they swept the White Sox. I mean, it has been a time you look back on in this season, because I believed at that point in time it was really going to test the Royals, and it was early on enough where they needed to prove themselves to a lot of people out there. I think they needed to prove it to themselves a little bit of, look, we've beaten up on some bad teams, but now we're going to get tested. How do we stack up? And even though they lost a couple of series, I thought they hung in there with a lot of really good teams. Really, the Yankees were the only team in that first gauntlet that beat them up badly. They hung with the Dodgers, right? They hung with Cleveland. They hung with San Diego. They had somewhat hung with Minnesota, fought hard at the tail end of a lot of those games, even though it was a series loss. This time around, with a 3.5 game cushion in the wild card, they're 2.5 games out of first place. They're going to get the Phillies, who have been struggling in the second half, but still a first place team in the National League East. They're going to get Cleveland for 4 on the road to open up next week. And then they're going to have Houston for 4 over the weekend. So that week alone feels like it could be the test of the gauntlet. Then they come back home for Cleveland and Minnesota, a chance to gain some ground in the Central or build that wild card cushion. And then they'll wrap up the gauntlet in the Bronx against the New York Yankees. They'll have an off day on September 12th. And that, to me, will be the day we'll know. That, to me, even though there would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 15 games left in the season. So we would be at game 147. That day, September 12th, we're going to know if this Royals team is going to be in October. They likely won't have mathematically clinched a berth, even if they play well in this gauntlet. But I think we're going to know depending on how well they play. And I look at this stretch of games. You got Philly for 3. Then, of course, those 8 games against Cleveland and Houston, there's 11, 14 after that series in Cleveland, 3 more against Minnesota, 20 games flat. So 20 games flat. The Royals find a way to go 10-10. I would be able to stomach 8-12 if it also meant Boston wasn't playing well, but I'm not going to bank on that. Now, if you're 10-10, I think you still hold a playoff spot and feel all right with it. That's just setting the bar kind of low. But a part of this segment is to make you want to run through a wall. This, to me, is going to be the absolute best possible test for this team. And even if things are not going well, this is everything you dream of with a team that is over-exceeding expectations and are fighting to keep their playoff spot. You want them playing against division rivals. You want them going to New York, going to Houston, and having those games be tight all the way until the 9th inning. No, the adrenaline rush to be able to have the air fist pumps after games in which they close things out or a big home run late. That's what these next 20 games are going to be all about. It is going to be that exhibition, if you will, for the postseason. The nerves you're going to feel. And no, exhibition's maybe not the best word to use because these games are not exhibitions. They matter, and they matter more than they have all season long. Like, you could argue these are the most important 20 games the Royals have had all season. You take any sort of 20-game stretch this year, none of them will be as important as this one. Even when it's done, I'm not looking at those 15 games, even if they need to win 6 of them to mathematically clinch a playoff spot. Those 20 games are going to be what I go back to. They make it or they don't. Those 20 games are what I'm looking at. That's going to be the end-all, be-all. This will be the defining stretch for the 2024 Royals. If they were built to go to the postseason, This is something they have to survive. And I'm sure they're telling themselves, we not only want to survive it, we want to come out on the other end feeling better about ourselves, more confident. We don't want to go just 10-10. We want to go 12-8. We want to go 14-6. We're setting that level of expectation. And it's not going to shock me with how confident this group is, how unfazed they are by, scary teams, big names coming in. You could have the argument of, well, they don't play well against good teams. They have bad records against playoff teams. That's not really what I'm getting at. I don't think I've ever seen this Royals team look at a good team and look like a deer in the headlights, look terrified, look completely rattled by who they were facing. They may not match up all that well talent-wise, but they're not scared of them. They're not scared of Philadelphia. They're not scared of Cleveland. They're not scared of Houston. I don't think they're scared of anybody. They might not match up well with them, but they go into every single one of these games feeling like they're the better team, and they can beat them. And that's what you want from a group that has already done what a lot of people thought would be impossible. That they are going to get September, and September is going to matter. They're going to get to that point in the year, and those final games are going to matter for the first time in nearly a decade. Even in 2017, it wasn't like this. They were scrambling, scratching, and clawing to even stay afloat. This is where you can really cement yourself as a playoff team. Going to be a lot of fun series. There's going to be opportunities to not only make the playoffs, but maybe get to first in the division. This will be one of the most exciting 20-game stretches that we have seen in Kansas City since 2015. I would argue this is the most exciting 20-game stretch Royals baseball has had since 2015. Should be a lot of fun. It begins on Friday after the off day. The Philadelphia Phillies come to town. Hopefully some big crowds this weekend at Kauffman Stadium. Well, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. Now go check out the Locked On MLB podcast. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day. You can find the link to Locked On MLB in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. When we have our show tomorrow, I promise that what I teased in this episode is going to actually happen. I want to talk a little bit more about Lucas Erceg and his dominance. We'll preview that series against the Philadelphia Phillies, and also another guy in that bullpen that I think can be a difference maker. That's all coming up tomorrow on Locked On Royals, but until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.